Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
Great to have you on stage.
How's everybody doing? So I'm loud, which is why they tend to put me at this spot slightly after lunch to keep everybody awake. So my name's Steve Gates, and I've been a designer for a really long time. And one of the things that I've found in coming to a lot of festivals like this is that people come, they get a lot of information, they get really, really inspired. I come back to that festival a year later, I see that same person, and I said, well, are things better? Is your company doing better? What's going on? And they just kind of put their head down and try to walk away from me, because the thing that I've found is that all the great information in the world doesn't add up to a lot if you don't have the leadership that can actually make it happen. So I'll continue the trend of being the person who shows childhood photos, apparently. That was not planned. But so this was me. This is when I started my design education. My father was a creative director. This was me at 4 years old, standing on the 700-pound letterpress in my parents' basement, learning typography. I've been a paid designer since I was 12 years old. So while people will say they were born to be a designer, in my case, it's literally true. So that means I've been designing for about 25 years. I've been leading creative teams at advertising agencies on brands like American Airlines, Exxon, Subaru, W, St. Regis, a whole bunch of other ones. I have been lucky enough over that time that I've worked with Apple a lot. My work's been included in, I think, 9 of their keynotes, 4 TV commercials. It's in the human interface guidelines, you name it. I've done a ton of stuff with them. I've worked in ad agencies for 15 years, confused all of my friends by saying I'm going to leave the ad agency and go work for a hotel company. And so I worked there for 10 years, and the funny thing about that was that everybody was really confused until the first time our work showed up in an Apple ad, and then they all wanted to find out if we were hiring. So then about a year ago, I did the next natural thing. I left Starwood to go join a bank. And so I'm now the first head of design in the 200-year history of Citibank. And I know what you're thinking. Whenever we want to hear about design, we want to hear about innovation, we want to hear from a guy who works at a bank. So, no, it's a joke. You can laugh at it. I get it. But I think that, this is the thing, is that everybody wants to lead. They want to do better. And I think that, the first thing to understand, and I see this, every company in the world is dysfunctional. Apple is dysfunctional, Google's dysfunctional. It's just how functional are they? How strong is their leadership to help them overcome that? So here are just some of the basic leadership problems that people have to overcome. The first one is, if you're going to lead a team, you have to have perspective, which means that you have to be a part of the team. You have to be an insider and know what is going on. But at the exact same moment, you have to be a complete outsider, because I have to be able to see, where does this team need to go? And doing both of those at the same time is more than a little bit of a trick. You need to be able to make progress. It's like for me, whenever you come into a bank, being new means you can get a lot done, but new has a shelf life. And the problem is that people will solve short-term problems much more often because they're much easier than the big ones. Big ones are hard to solve. That's why people haven't done it in quite a while. Fear. They did a study. 85% of people said that they are afraid to say what they truly think at work all across the world. So that they're afraid that they think that if they speak up, something bad's going to happen. Futility. This is something every time I come in and take over a team, I'm the one who is brought in at agencies, at companies to try to fix things. And it's futility, because they've heard it before. They've seen guys come in. They talk about this time it's going to be different. Why should they believe me? Why is this time going to be any different? And I think comfort, and this is the biggest thing throughout my career that I've seen, is that there are so many people who I've worked with who are incredible thinkers, who are incredible leaders, who will choose comfort over greatness. Because for them, it is easier to stay with what they know than to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and doing something new. And I think that's the hardest part, because so much of leadership is getting people to believe and to do something that they haven't done before. And the reality is, there's no secret to being a great leader. The same way I'll teach people that there is no secret to being great creative. Because what makes me a great leader, what are my confidences, what are my fears, what are my self-doubts, are going to be different than everybody here. That's why they will write self-help books until the world ends, because there's no silver bullet for everybody. And the funny thing is that this is, talking about Apple, with Steve Jobs. This is one of the ones that everybody holds up, almost as a saint. Steve was the greatest. He came back. He turned Apple around. Trust me, I am somebody who has spent time talking with Steve Wozniak, who founded Apple with him. I have worked with people who spent a lot of time working with Steve, and they will all tell you that he needed to get fired to become a good leader. Because the reality was, whenever he first started there, he was a visionary. He was really good at what he did. He was not good at running that company. And so that was the thing, is that he had to learn how to be a leader. And so this is the thing for me. Leaders are made. They aren't born. There's a lot in my career that I've had to learn. I was somebody who was terrified to speak in front of more than 2 people coming out of college. I now regularly talk in front of groups of thousands of people because it's something I've had to learn. So if leaders are made, where do we start? And I think that was what I wanted to kind of focus on today, is to try to help teach you guys some of the things that I found to be very, very successful as I've come into very small companies to where I am now, which is a company of over 200,000 people, to make things different. And for me, it starts with a foundation. And I think every great company and every great leader has a foundation made up of 3 different parts. The first part is process, which sounds incredibly unsexy, I know, but can be a very, very powerful way to change things. Culture, which is an often overlooked part of this, and finally, creativity. So I want to briefly talk about each one of these. Process. So one of the things that I've used for forever is design thinking. This kind of makes me laugh. Recently in the States and in other places, design thinking has suddenly become very in vogue again. Everybody wants to start using design thinking. Design thinking was invented in 1960. So I find it really funny that everybody just recently discovered it again. It was made popular by IDEO. But one of the things that I did when I first came into Citi was I said, look, if we need to do things differently, we need to start thinking differently. So one of the things that we did was we went out and actually partnered with IDEO to create our own version of design thinking. Because the reality is, and I'll talk about this a bit in a minute, the way that people think is far more important than simply the way that they behave. And so, design thinking really looks at 3 major areas of getting business done. First off, is your idea viable? Is it something that the business actually wants? Is it desirable? Will people actually go out and buy it? And finally, is it feasible? Is it something that technically can be built? Most of the ideas that you see fall flat can do 2, but not all 3 of them. And the reality is that if you can find something that does all 3, that's where innovation actually is. And because my career has been built on doing innovation that actually launches, you will see tons of leaders who will stand on this stage who will talk about what could be done someday. I'm sorry, I'm not impressed by that. For me, innovation is stuff that actually ships out into the world, and that's something that I've really tried to build my career around. And so design thinking has 3 very basic parts. This part alone is a 5-day class that I teach for everybody. I have 18.5 minutes, so sorry, you're just getting a chart. But it really works through ideation, inspiration, ideation, and implementation. And all that it really does is it allows everybody to have a process to be creative, because most people who are creative do it naturally. I am somebody who now has to work with lawyers and regulators and a whole bunch of people who haven't been creative since they were a child. Because if you would ask them when you're a child, are you a painter? Are you a craftsperson? Are you a potter? Every kid would put their hand up. We lose that over time. Schooling, society, all teaches us to forget how creative we all can be. Design thinking lets you bring all of that back. And so it's really just walking through a series of steps from how might we do something through delivery and through these different arcs of having a lot of ideas and then narrowing it down, having a lot of ideas, narrowing it down time and time again to be able to do this. And the reason why I talk about this is because design thinking makes creativity a team sport. And for me, creativity it's a behavior, it's not a department. Because in so many companies, it's like there's a creative department and that's who does this and nobody else. And I've never bought into that. And the reason why is because with design thinking, I can suddenly bring everybody to the table. And all the people who are suddenly such obstacles for me getting something done, a funny thing happens because people will support what they're a part of. If I bring them in, if I make them a part of this, all of a sudden they're very enthusiastic. They're the cheerleaders for my ideas. And that's incredibly important. And I think that the other thing for me is that there has never been a bigger Trojan horse for change that I've used in a leadership space than design thinking. Because all of a sudden when you bring everybody to the table, all of a sudden when they're all supporting that idea, the funny thing happens is that all of a sudden that your design group and your leadership becomes the center of what everybody wants to do, which is incredibly important. The next one to talk about is culture. And I think this is one that everybody wants, but very few people actually understand how to create. And one of the things that I've always believed in is that culture is either created by default or it's created by design. Most companies, whenever I go in and speak to them, it's created by default. It is just simply the attitude that everybody has whenever they come to work there, or worse, they look at the person in charge as being the single person who has to be in charge of the culture. I'm somebody that believes it gets done by design. And the way that I've always done that is there is a set of what I call beliefs. And these are the things that really define the mentality of the way that my group operates. It gives them something to believe in, because nothing that is in these beliefs is rocket science. Putting it on the wall seems to be. And so it's made up of these 5 different areas, and specific examples would be things like we're problem solvers, we're not permission seekers, because it's one of those things where we need to go out and tackle the problems, especially if you work internally, that can really become a big problem. Respectful and confident, but not delicate. This means that we can be very nice to our clients, but if there is a problem, we're going to say that it is a problem. There's nothing that drives me crazier than we're going to tiptoe around something that everybody sees. I'll always joke that it's like there's a stack of pink elephants in the middle of the room, and everybody's just feeding them peanuts. And you go, is there a problem? And you go, yep. Nobody wanted to change that. So I think that that is a really big deal. But I think with these beliefs, the reason why I do this is because I have to be able to create the entire team to buy into what we're doing. I have to be able to coach them. I have to be able to get them to understand what it is that we need to do. And the beliefs allow me to work from either a very large set, so I can coach an entire team, I could coach a group, or I could coach an individual person. And so this is something, if you want to, you can go to my website. There's a big article that lists all of these out. But it's something that really gives you a structure to start to work people through. And finally, creativity. Because I don't know about any of you, I never had a class that was called How to Have an Idea. I never knew what did I do to have a good idea. And the problem is the more senior you become, and especially if you're somebody like me, like if I'm working with Apple or if I'm working with my CEO, they would like an answer to a question right now. They don't want it in 3 days. So I need to be able to summon my creativity on demand, and I need my team to do the same thing. And so for me, this always comes down to this idea that like light bulbs, so whenever you have an idea, there's a light bulb, that's bullshit. Like nobody has ever had an idea like that. You might have had an inspiration like that, but you've never actually had an idea. Ideas are a lot of work. And so the problem is that everybody creates those ideas differently. This is why if I give one problem to everyone in here, they're all going to come back with different answers, because we all connect those dots differently. So there's something that I've created, which is probably the single most stolen idea I've ever had. So at this point, I've just started giving it away. This is also the way that I will also usually interview people whenever they want to come and join my team, which sometimes will terrify them, but I think it's a really great way to be able to actually see how people think. I don't need any more friends. I don't care if you're nice. I need to know how you think. And so what I do is I pose a very simple problem to them. It says, why would a particular brand make a particular product? And what you get is 1 minute to think about that combination and 2 minutes on the spot to pitch me on the answer. And I'll give you some examples of that. So there are 2 decks of cards that you have to choose from. One are the brands, very common ones you've heard of all the time. The other ones are products. So for example, why would Nike make a gasoline can? 1 minute to think about it, 2 minutes to pitch me on it. Why would Twitter make a lipstick? They're purposely meant to be ridiculous, because I want to see how people can connect the dots, and I want them to see just in the moment how they can think. Or how do we take one of the sponsors here, Mercedes, and how would they make an inflatable pool? Just simply, off the top of your head, explain this to me. And there are some people, whenever I do this, can see start smiling, and you're starting to figure it out, and other ones look completely terrified. And that's kind of the point, is because the ones who start to smile and really get into it, those are the ones that I want to work with. But it really is the fact that creativity and your ability to have a team that is creative makes you an essential part of the company. I see so many teams who think that it's just their ability to hit a deadline. Hit a deadline makes you a commodity. You can easily be gotten rid of. This is why, for most internal teams, which I've been leading lately, why they think external ad agencies are smarter than the internal team. Kind of drives me crazy. But these 3 things are just a foundation. And I think this is the starting point. So these are the 10 things that I have learned the incredible hard way throughout my career, that if you want to walk away and try and figure out how to be a better leader, these are the 10 things I would encourage you to do. The first one is to have an obsessive focus on the fundamentals. If you talk about a sports team, if you talk about anything like that, they will talk about having to do the fundamentals right. Because for me, if you get the fundamentals right, that is getting the foundation in place to anticipate success. Because my team will know that I will go in to look at files. I can tell you if a typeface is 1 point off. I am that crazy. But the reason why is because every little detail matters. And you have to, as a leader, really drive that home, that if we aren't doing the fundamentals right, nothing else matters. Because the problem is, people don't want to focus on the fundamentals. They want the beginning. They want that we started in a garage. There was a big project that we got, and they want the end. They want the launch party. The 80% in the middle that requires the fundamentals, not as much fun. The second thing is to empower your people to find their own solutions. Because so many teams will stand there and think, well, the leader that's a part of this group, he's the one that has all the answers. It is not a sustainable model. Every single person on my team is responsible for coming up with a solution to the problem, because then we can also have a discussion about that. So I can start forming future leaders. I'm not somebody who thinks that, oh, I just need to keep hiring in new people. But if you come to me with what it is that you want to do, it makes it much easier for us to be able to have a discussion about if it's the right solution or not. Walk your talk. It sounds so simple. Do what you say. People know. People remember. The thing with leadership, it is incredibly easy to say the right thing. Everybody says the right thing. Doing the right thing, especially when it gets hard, a little bit tougher. The fourth thing, embrace failure as the path to success. This is something that I have spent years with executives coaching them on. Because if you want to do something innovative, it means we are going to get it wrong a lot on the way to getting it right. And so this idea that everything is a home run, that everything has to be perfect, is not sustainable. It is not realistic. Whenever you will come to any of my teams, they will talk to you about how I create a culture of failure, which always sounds very strange, but it is something that for us, it really is, because creativity is not about getting it right. It's about getting it wrong a lot on the way to getting it right. What I talked about before, I don't care if you run an accounting firm, I don't care if you run an ad agency, no matter what you do, you need to take the time from a leadership perspective to understand, value, and grow everyone's process. They are all different, but it is something that I do not want a version of little people who work just the way that I do. It's fascist, it's boring, and people leave. They don't like that. They want to be someplace where they can learn and they can grow. It's something that is incredibly important. The sixth thing that I've done is that I try to be very open. Anybody, the first day that I start, I will put my cell phone number up on a screen and anybody can call me that wants to, is that I do a feedback model whenever I talk to anyone that's called start, stop, and continue. What I ask them are, what are the 3 things you wish I would start doing? What are the 3 things you wish I would stop doing? And what are the 3 things you really wish I would continue doing? Because it's a very straightforward answer to really get to what people are thinking and to get them to tell you what they really want to do. The seventh thing, huge mistake that I see in leadership, is that you have to coach thinking, don't coach behavior. The way that somebody behaves is simply the symptom of the way that they think. Until you can change the way that they think, you are not going to change the group. And so you have to actually get in and understand, why are they doing the things that they do? Why are they thinking the way that they do? So that it's something that you can get in and really change. The eighth thing is to understand the difference between creating and leading. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I see teams make all the time. Just because I'm a really good designer does not mean that I have any of the skills that I need to go and lead that team. They are 2 fundamentally different things. So understand that just because somebody is really good at doing something does not mean that when you're going to put them in a leadership position, they're going to succeed. The ninth thing, leadership sucks. Leadership is hard. Everybody buys into this myth that, like, I'm a leader, everybody's going to love me, it's going to be great, it's going to be awesome, they're going to throw me a parade. Sorry, nope. Because whenever people have to do something differently, people don't like change. So your leadership has to be stronger than their excuses. And finally, the last thing I'll tell you, embrace your crazy. Because the reality is, if this is going to be tough, if this is going to be hard, if this is going to be something that you're going to have to do, understand that the way that you do it, because whenever people tell you no, whenever they tell you that it's not going to work, you have to embrace and be crazy enough to do it anyway. Because while they will first tell you that you're crazy, as soon as you find some success, they're going to seek you out because they think you're crazy and because they want that. This was a lesson that I really, really had to learn the hard way, and it's something that every day I have to have a reminder of so that anybody who knows me knows that I actually have, here's to the crazy ones, tattooed on my right arm, because this is something that every day, some days it reminds me what I need to do, some days it is an affirmation that I did the right thing, but no matter what, it also lets everybody know where I'm coming from. That's it. Anybody have any questions?